Hey there friends, it's Codiak here, welcome back to Legacy Gaming and welcome to Elden Ring. Today we're checking out another boss and breaking down everything you need to know to defeat the Ulcerated Tree Spirit, and of course talk about the loot you get for killing it. Straight up, this boss is no joke, and if you decide to take it on early, you better be prepared. We're talking about a couple of things working against you here. One, it's massive, and that makes tracking its abilities that much harder because you're constantly struggling to see the boss in your visual field. Two, the room is tiny by comparison. Sure, it's big enough for a normal-sized boss, but when something this massive is writhing across the room at a blistering pace, it becomes a challenge. Finally, the boss has a complicated moveset, more so than most of the encounters we've talked about so far, but as always, let's not get ahead of ourselves and take you through this one step at a time. To find the Ulcerated Tree Spirit, you need to unlock the first Stone Sword Fog Wall you encounter within the game. This is located before you ascend to Limgrave and requires 2 Stone Sword keys to unlock. There is a bit of a gauntlet leading up to this boss, which we break down in our previously released video, but I definitely recommend you give it a shot yourself first, but if you do struggle, check out that quick guide to help you through. Where to start with this boss? It's a complicated fight, but I'm going to do my best to break it down step by step, ability by ability, and as always, let's start at the top with Phase 1. It's very possible the first attack you'll see is a lunging slither. This is a gap-closing ability that allows the boss to move across the entire length of the room, dealing damage to you if you're caught in its path. Because of the size of the boss, it's very possible you'll need to string 2 dodge rolls together to avoid this. The boss will also commonly use a writhing attack. This starts off looking like the lunging slither, but instead it'll flail around the room, dealing damage to players if they're caught in the wake. This is one of those abilities it's best to just stay far away from, as it's very hard to predict and almost always deadly, especially in melee range. One move that will no doubt throw players off while they're learning this fight is the boss's Roar Chomp combination. First, the boss will let out a scream, then, after a bit of a flourish, will lunge forward mouth wide open. If it catches the player, you'll be locked in an animation and almost certainly die, especially if you're tackling this challenge early on in your progression. You'll see this move a lot in Phase 1, and it takes a second to figure out, so just be patient while trying to figure out the dodge window. If the boss misses with this attack, it's almost always followed up by a classic dragon-style fire breath. This is incredibly dangerous if you're a ranged player, as the fire will consume a large portion of the room, especially if the boss is positioned the right way. If you're a melee player, you're pretty much safe for a time underneath the boss. This is a great time to land in some free hits. During Phase 1, the boss also has a few basic abilities, one of which is a simple claw swipe. Again, it's really hard to see because of the boss's size, but once you see it a few times, it becomes easy enough to identify. Like a dragon, the boss also employs a tail whip to great effect. This has a sharp whipping motion that makes it tricky to predict, and the speed of the attack makes the dodge window a bit tight, so be wary. Finally, if that wasn't all enough, the boss will occasionally lift up its massive head and slam it down on the ground. This is the equivalent to an overhead chop, just scaled up to monster-sized proportions. At around 60-ish% health, the boss will begin to glow, indicating that he's about to explode into an AoE of fire. This will damage any players that stay in melee range, which is why it's best to roll straight back as soon as you see this mechanic coming. Also, be on the lookout for glowing yellow spots on the ground. These will erupt at the exact same time, dealing damage and knocking players up caught in the blast. From this point on, nearly everything has been augmented with fire, and each ability is slightly amplified. The boss will still use a claw swipe, but only now it's on fire. The good news is this animation doesn't really change. What is a bit different is the boss's new claw backhand ability. Instead of raking across its body, the boss will swipe the opposite direction in an attempt to catch you off guard. The boss will continue to use its tail whip mechanic during the phase, and as you guessed it, yep, that tail is on fire. A new ability, the boss will rear back and slam both of its massive claws in front of it, dealing some AoE damage. This has a relatively long windup, but is a new animation, so it's something to look out for. If you're in melee range, watch out because the boss will also now use a stomp ability. This is kind of like the slam ability, but a bit more low-key. The boss will pick up one of its claws, slamming it down once to the side, and then a second time slightly more forward. Finally, let's talk about the boss's flaming head whip ability. Think tail whip, but with the boss's head, and you'll get the idea. This has a massive range and comes out of nowhere, so now, not only do you have the boss on fire, but you have to watch out for the tail attack and the head attacks. When it comes to taking on this boss, there is nothing that's going to replace practice. Livid, in his 11 years of playing Souls games, struggled on this fight. And I'm not saying that because I think he's bad, but to give you an understanding of just how challenging this boss can be. The first thing I'll say is that melee players will want to hug this boss. your best chance for safety is actually right underneath him. You'll just need to learn how to deal with any of the attacks that will deal immediate damage when directly next to the boss. Being close means having a much tougher time seeing the mechanics, but in this case, the size is working in your favor, as most of those major abilities are actually easier to avoid when operating this close. The real challenge with this fight, as I said in the intro, is the size of the boss compared to the size of the room, and that's something you just have to get used to. Because the Ulcerating Tree Spirit is almost serpent-like in its animations, there is a lot of fluidity in its moveset, which requires a trained eye to identify. One of the silver linings with this boss is the longer rest windows between attacks, which means a chance to heal, but you can't waste time as the boss's ability to move quickly across the room and deal damage is impressive. Tackling this boss early is a huge trap, a cruel trick from FromSoft to lure in new players curious about what's behind that first Stone Sword fog wall. But it is beatable. When Livid took on this challenge, he was level 30, if that gives you any indication, and I will say this, based on the recordings we captured, it took him 2.5 hours to defeat. Be patient, learn to read the boss's serpentine motion, stay underneath him to score your best chance at damage, and again, be patient. With practice, determination, and skill, the Ulcerated Tree Spirit will fall. High risk, high reward. That's really why we decided to take on the Ulcerated Tree Spirit as soon as possible. This boss is no joke, and as you'd expect, you're decently rewarded for your efforts. The first item you'll receive for killing this boss is a golden seed. This is used to increase the capacity of your flask and arguably one of the most coveted items in the game for that reason. The second thing you get is a spirit summon, Banished Knight Oleg. This is a powerful ally that wields 2 swords and can tap into some powerful wind attacks to not only tank enemies but deal substantial damage to them as well. The real catch-22 here is that Oleg costs 100 FP to summon, so if you don't have the reserves, he really is of no use to you. That being said, this is a summon worth going after simply because of how powerful he is. Hopefully now you have a better understanding of how to defeat the Ulcerated Tree Spirit. As always, our goal here at Legacy Gaming is to bring you guides that get straight to the point so you can get back to the action. And if you appreciate that, we'd appreciate your support. Hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing for more Elden Ring boss guides and more in your feeds. Of course, if you still have questions, you can join us on Discord. Our community just passed 20,000 members, and with a small section dedicated just for Elden Ring, there's always someone around to help out and answer questions. Check out the link below to join today. Finally, if you like everything we're doing here on the channel and you want to support us even more, you can do so by becoming a member. For just a couple bucks, you're helping Livid and I achieve our dreams of becoming full-time content creators. Check out the join button below to learn more. My name is Codiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.